everybody. This is Scott McDonald of Dr. Demographics, and we're doing our weekly webinar here. Now, I got to explain something. First of all, I look at myself on this screen and I think, my gosh, is my hair that bad? And the truth is, the older I get, the weirder it gets. But I had pretty weird hair when I was young. So let's go on to a topic that might matter to this group. First of all, you guys, there are some things going on that are obvious and things that are not. And that has to do with where to put a practice. That is, after all, what we're talking about. Where should you go and what are the factors that you need to consider are really important and not so important, and they're not the same as they always have been. Now, remember, most of the time, people are looking at one measurement when it comes to the general population, the media, let's say, when they're talking about places that have potential, and they're looking at one factor, and that is growth, as I'll go into in just a second. They sort of believe that all growth is necessarily good and it's fantastic, and you want to just be darn thrilled that they're sharing that fact with you. Not so much. Look, there are things that you need to know. And increase in population is generally a good thing. However, different places are growing in a different way. And for a professional practice, this is particularly important. Now, I'm going to give you an example before I get into my little content here. If you look at the headlines right now, everybody's saying that the urban areas in the United States are all of a sudden being reborn, and they're fantastic. Remember, most of those stories are planted by public relations agencies. I know, I used to work for a public relations agency, and the thing is, they're really working hard and being paid big money in order to say that urban locations are great. Some of them are, but most of them are still having a problem in one area. The population is not moving there. Now, there are a lot of people there, and when they have a slight increase in population, they make headlines and say, oh my gosh, we're back. Not so much. And the other thing that you have to keep in mind is who is going into the urban areas is also rather important. There was a time in which all young people were looking for jobs, and they were therefore heading to highly dense populations, urban areas, so to speak. That trend has rather reversed itself in about the last 2 or 3 years. So I just want you to be aware that what the media is telling you is often highly influenced by what the media wants to say about it. And you just have to take a little bit of a scant view of that. Now, I'm referring to this as tipping the scales for practice potential. And here's what I mean by that. Next week, I'm going to talk about specific places that I'm seriously recommending that you look during this beginning of the summer season. There are some news things that are coming out, statistics that are being released on demography that are going to matter. And I really need about a week in order to process that. But the factors that are taking these places and making them good or bad, that's happening right now. So what I'm talking about is what the factors are that are tipping the scales for or against a particular location. So I'm looking about the process right now that I want you to keep in mind when it comes to figuring out where to put a practice. Now, just to remind you, Dr. Demographics is all about knowing where to move, start a business or practice, promote your efforts, and to get the most out of your location. We are in the business of where analysis. And in doing that, there are some things which I'm coming to understand and appreciate about places that have looked like they were really at death's door. Places in Illinois, for example, that have actually done increasingly well, and other places like, say, in upstate New York that are looking better and better. That's because that's where people want to live and work. But there are places that you're being sold a bill of goods, and guys, we just have to know that the where decisions are not based on the same metrics as previously. Now, what are the real factors for new practice potential? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of those are going to tip the scales in favor of some locations and away from others Next week, I'll talk about the specific locations that I'm thinking are looking pretty hot. Now, as we look at these factors, everyone is a little surprised because they were sort of assuming that there was going to be a roaring back as soon as the pandemic ended. You know that everybody's getting vaccinated. You already know that the number of deaths in the United States is very tiny, and the number of people getting sick is also tiny. They're also recommending influenza injections, not only for the elderly and vulnerable, but also even for, well, kids and teens. And so it's just making it so that there's plenty of vaccine to go around. The United States is exporting it. And you'd think, wow, let's celebrate. But they're still doing everything they can to make everybody wear masks. And there's a reason why. I'm not going to get into that too much today, but I will just say there are some places that are much more desirous to open up than others. Now, everyone is surprised about the factors that I'm going to talk about. You don't need to be, and you probably are not. Because here's the thing about doctors, you've got a lot more connection with the population in your area than people who are the data geeks and government officials around the United States. Now, these are the leading factors for practice potential. What I'm really telling you is some of these are old, some are new, though, and some are developing. Now, the obvious thing is, yes, is it important that there is a large and increasing population in your area? Yeah, kind of. And let me explain what I mean by that. I live in Utah, as you probably know, and we are getting a boatload of people every weekend coming out with looking for places to live and places to set up practice. We have a lot of them. Not all of them are equally good, but it's a good thing, of course, when there's lots of people, and I'm saying that firsthand. Utah's looking great. The same thing is true in Florida and Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia. Those places are doing really well, but not only just in terms of population, but in terms of the kinds of people coming and the kinds of businesses that they're bringing with them. You see, one of the things about a population increase, it's most desirable when people are able to work and, well, some other things that I'll talk about as we go along here. Now, not demographic factors. I mean, people are not taking the who, okay, as an example, who's got the money? Who is having children? Who is bringing employment with them? Who are the people who have creditworthiness? Does that matter to the desirability of a particular place? And the answer is, heck yeah. Creditworthiness of the population that's moving out is moving into a new area is extremely important and not very talked about. There's a weird thing that somehow the government believes that if they just give enough money away, everything's going to be fine. You probably know that, but it's not true. You know that unless there's a sustainable income and the economy organically can grow, it's not going to be enough just to have a lot of people moving into the area. We've seen that story back in the 1970s and particularly in the 80s when there was a lot of inflation and people were going, oh yeah, I want to move there because there's jobs. But things were expensive and things were difficult. Now, increasing population is good, but here's a factor that people were not thinking about that is strongly affecting where people are wanting to move. So it's why is the population increasing? And school reopenings happen to be one of those things. So how do you find that out? Well, unfortunately, there's no really great national database that says, oh yeah, these school districts are all open. We do know, however, that a lot of the very large school districts are really fighting to have in-person classes. Where do people want to go? They want to go where some place that their kid can get an education, will get out of the house. Because here's what happens. If people have their kid go back to school, they can work. When their kid is staying at home, a lot of people say, I'm just going to have to bear it until whenever. Now, what's happened is during the summer months, and kids would normally be staying home, there isn't that shift. But what people are doing, and this is based on some pretty solid research, the people are looking for those school districts that are going to be open or that are open right now. And you may think, well, that doesn't matter. Yeah, it does, because the largest school districts are the ones with the strongest unions. And the unions are controlling whether or not face-to-face teaching occurs. That is influencing where people are wanting to move. Now, you already know, I'm sure you know this, that most couples, families, husbands and wives, mom and dad both have a job. And you know that the majority of people that are married also have kids. So those people are making a rational decision to try to say, where can we go that the schools are open? And they don't trust that it's going to happen in the fall. In fact, research is indicating that a lot of people are doubting the statistics that they're hearing. And therefore, they're saying, we want to know right now where there's school reopening. And that is turning out to be a plum location for you to figure out where to practice. Now, practices are either bought and sold or they're started up. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But, well, let's just put it this way. There are not a lot of practices for sale. The market is very small. Many of them have increased the price of their offices dramatically. And not only that cost, the availability of offices has been reduced because not as many people are willing to put their practices on the market. They want to kind of stay and do that which is safe. Now, a general factor about doctors is you tend to love stability and tend to be cautious. And that's because you're smart. You're not giving that up. But what we're finding is some locations you cannot get into a practice for love or for money. And with that in mind, you have to consider the availability of startup sites. And to do that, you have to go back to that point about increasing the population, and ideally a population that has open schools. Are you with me so far? Now, let's talk about one other thing. I used to refer to it as the cool factor. There are some places that it was kind of cool to start a practice or to purchase a practice, and people were willing to pay a premium to do that. In my days in Los Angeles and San Francisco, in Seattle, I was doing a lot of reports for people that thought this is really the cool place to live. This is where you want to practice. It has a vibe to it. And a lot of people are looking at cities like Austin, Texas, as being terrific because they were available and they were cool. Everybody wanted to go where it's cool. Right now, that's not so much a factor. More important is what is the cost of getting into a practice and how many offices are available. That is overcoming any kind of mitigating factor like cool or a place that somehow might be considered trendy. Drop the idea of trendiness. And I say that because sometimes the best locations in the United States right now are those found in lower density populated areas. It doesn't mean you're looking for a rural site necessarily, but you have to find a location where the population is increasing and is family friendly. Now, what draws families to a site? And that is, number one, are there houses? And I mean single family dwellings. If you've got a 3-bedroom home, I don't care how big or small it is, with 2 baths, you got a backyard, you got a garage, that is right now what is in demand. And the price of housing has gone up very high. But availability of housing is becoming a problem in some markets. And that's because the governments in those areas do not want to grow. Now, I'm going to give you an example. It's California. California is worried about a lot of things that you may not know about. And one of those big ones is energy. The electrical grid in California today is doing okay, but they are implementing planning on, brownouts and blackouts. And they're trying to figure out how they can do it cost effectively and not have everybody come after them with axe handles and pitchforks. So if you look at a place like most of California, not all of it, but most of California, that cool factor was always very high, but the availability of electricity is making it so the state does not want more people moving in, and they certainly are making it difficult to construct new homes. Therefore, you're having to put up with existing inventory of homes. Now, the bottom line is this. You've got a place which is highly desirable. I mean, I'm from California. It was great. But right now they're thinking we'd be better off if people looked somewhere else for a place to live and work. Now, practice transitions have always been the safest way to go. You purchase a practice, you know the patient base and all that. Here's a little problem. When it comes right down to it, the population that used to be reliable isn't quite as reliable as they used to be. They're picking up and leaving, and therefore the patient base that you're purchasing is not as easy to convert into long-term patients for the new doctor. Practice transitions, therefore, are becoming a little less significant in terms of the practice market. And more important, in fact, is if you get into an area that is growing or showing animal spirits with a population that is desirable. And I mean by that, they're willing to purchase a place to live, a home, and stay there. That's what you're looking for. The inventory of practices for sale is getting to be very small. Now, is it hopeless? The answer is no, it is not. It is not hopeless. But I'll tell you, one of the things that we do for people in our best sites reports is we will look for the locations that show the most growth, but also the characteristic of making it affordable to purchase a practice or to start up. And that's really right now the emphasis of our best sites reports. It isn't just to say, are there lots of practices for sale in that area? Because that right now is not happening. So you have to consider the metrics involved and where to go. That's what I'm talking about. Now, if you would like to get in touch with us, you can always call us at 833-424-6222 or go to drdemographics.com. The thing I'm telling people is when you need to get an answer in a hurry, and a lot of you are kind of thinking, I need to get these answers quickly, the product we've got that I think is going to work best for you is the telephone consultation. It does not take long to schedule, but we can give you solid answers in a fairly short period of time. Now, I'm going to be honest, we're getting a lot of calls. I've got a lot of consultations set up. That's because people are trying to figure out, where should I go? And they're looking for answers that are going to tell them that. So the telephone consultation is not as deep and it's not a written report, but it is the kind of thing that I can get data and tell you based upon your preferences where you want to go, that's where you ought to be. Now, I maybe am not the smartest businessman in the world because I keep telling people things they don't want to hear. I'll give you an example. I had a talk 2 days ago with a doctor who wanted to go to Hawaii. Say, come on, Hawaii, perfect weather, rich foreigners, place to be. And I would say, yeah, it's true, but it's an island, right? You know that? It is kind of isolated, and getting in and out of Hawaii right now is very hard. It's expensive. Trying to sell a practice is going to be hard too. In fact, doing a startup in Hawaii is nearly, not entirely, but nearly impossible unless you've got just the right neighborhood. So I'm telling people, not such a good idea. Now, that doesn't make a lot of people happy with me. I'm going to tell you the truth. There are some people who believe that they've got the secret sauce for a formula on where to go. And they may be right, but it just makes a lot of sense to get a person who's not already sold on the area or making money on the sale to tell you the facts about the site. Now, this has made a lot of brokers kind of, well, a little less than thrilled with us. It's not because I don't trust brokers. And by the way, you want to know, I do. There are some really spectacular brokers. And if you want to get a job done, if you want to purchase, you want to get in someplace, Having a good broker is absolutely vital. But you also kind of need that second opinion to say, is this going to be good, not just today, not just because the seller loves this, but as the buyer, where's a good place to go? So I'm kind of saying it might be a good idea. Second opinion in the telephone consultation is certainly a good option. I want to thank all of those people who've kind of stuck with us during these difficult times. And just remember, what we're trying to do is to give you information to make good decisions. I can't make the decisions for you, but I can tell you what the data is telling us, and therefore helping you to make good, solid decisions to find the perfect place to put a practice. I want to thank everybody for sticking with us and for listening to this episode. Next week, again, I'm going to talk about specific locations that I think are showing serious promise. The kiss of death are the most fun episodes because I'm telling you where not to go. But for now, let's kind of stick to that which has hope. So come visit us next week, and I look forward to talking to you. Thank you so much for watching.